Mark Weisbrot is one of the smartest economists in the country, and he's also a keen observer of the situation in South and Central America. He drops by to talk about Venezuela today. Grim news. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, and please subscribe to our channel. Mark Weisbrot is the co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research. CEPR.net is the website. He is the president of Just Foreign Policies, the author of several books, including Failed, What the Experts Got Wrong About the Global Economy. His Twitter handle is Mark Weisbrot, Weisbrot, and of course the website, as I said, CEPR.net. Mark, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Tom. Good to be with you.
It's always a pleasure having you with us. You really not only being one of those brilliant progressive economists out there, but you really understand both the political and the economic dynamics of what's going on in Central and South America. I'm curious your thoughts on the latest news out of Venezuela.
Well, the Trump administration is obviously trying to overthrow the government. That's their stated goal, but they haven't succeeded so far. The last coup attempt about a week ago didn't work. And so they're relying primarily on the sanctions. The idea is to squeeze the economy and shrink it, but more than that, to actually harm the civilian population until there's some kind of rebellion, and a military rebellion, or perhaps some kind of other rebellion that they're hoping for. And the sanctions have been very deadly. We did a report on it just a couple of weeks ago, estimated that tens of thousands, probably more than 40,000 people have died as a result of the sanctions since August of 2017, when the Trump administration imposed a broad financial embargo on the country.
We did this in 1959 or 1960 to Cuba. And that was, 68 years ago, if I'm doing my math right, 78 years ago. It was a long time ago, anyway. Yeah. And 58 years, whatever. And Cuba's still, moving along. Do you think that Venezuela has the ability to do that, or are they going to break under these sanctions? And if so, what might be the result?
It's a good question. Well, Cuba had help from the Soviet bloc after the sanctions. I think that made a huge difference. Right.
Well, Venezuela's getting help from Russia. I just don't think it's anywhere near as consequential as how the Soviets were helping the Cubans.
It's very little. And the sanctions are much more deadly than people realize. I mentioned the death toll, but, for example, the IMF is projecting this year, they changed their projections from negative 5% growth to negative 25 for 2019. So that's a quarter of their economy that's going to be wiped out. And they changed it because of the January sanctions, which are much more severe than the sanctions that you had from August of 2017 that have already killed so many people. So, for example, Venezuela's already lost more than a third of its oil production just in February and March. And that's and they're projected to lose most of their oil, probably 2/3 of their oil production this year. What was left in their oil production, they already lost a huge amount. And the oil is what pays for almost all of the imports of food, medicine, spare parts, medical equipment, things that you need for the healthcare and sanitation and water systems. So this is what they're actually cutting off when they cut all this off. And so this is just absolutely devastating. It's hard to imagine that the world is even going to allow it to happen during this year.
Yeah, although it seems to be happening right in front of us. Last night, Beto O'Rourke on Rachel Maddow's show said that he thought that Juan Guaido, the Speaker of the Parliament there, who never ran for president, is the actual credible president. And he's, there's something short of 50 other countries, including many of our allies, who agree with him on that. What's the story here? What's the dynamic? How did this come about? And what's the probable fate and future of it all?
Well, first of all, I'm almost sure that Beto O'Rourke doesn't even know that when you recognize a parallel government, you're automatically imposing a trade embargo and some more severe financial sanctions, because it means that the revenue that the government does have will, if the government sells any oil, it doesn't go to the government. It goes to the parallel government, to Juan Guaido. Of course, it can't even receive it. And so basically you're cutting off most of the export market for Venezuela. And you're also making it very hard for them, much harder for them to get essential imports like medicine, even with the cash that they have on hand. Because
so do you mean, hang on just a second,
financial system.
Do you mean if the United States was to recognize Juan Guaido as the legitimate president, and I think we have, then that means that anything we buy from Venezuela, we don't pay to the Venezuelan government, we pay it to Juan Guaido and his buddies? That's
right, and that's why the biggest chunk of Venezuela's exports to the U.S. are no longer being exported.
So that the money wouldn't be going back to Guaido?
Well, of course. Why would they sell oil to give him money?
Right.
And it's really quite outrageous. The whole thing is kind of outrageous. I mean, there are disputed elections all over the world, and nobody intervenes and says, well, this is the president we want. Pence called Guaido the night before. He announced that he was president and gave him the okay. And, this is something that it just isn't done. In fact, I don't think the United States has really done this since World War II, when the Nazis occupied France and they recognized the government in exile. So this is really extreme, and it violates all diplomatic, conventions.
Mm.
But you asked something else, Phil. Besides what?
I don't recall. Well, how do you expect to see this thing play out? Oh, yeah. There's some short of 50 other countries have also recognized Guaido as the legitimate president.
I wrote an article about that, actually. And this is very similar to George W. Bush's coalition of the willing in the Iraq War. He also had 48 countries. So all of these countries are political allies of the United States. So most of the world does not recognize the parallel government of Juan Guaido. Three-quarters of the countries in the world don't recognize it. And these really are allies. They're mostly right-wing governments. In Latin America, for example, they're almost all right-wing governments. And ironically, some of them came to power through other regime change operations of the United States, for example, the government of Honduras. Mexico and Uruguay, for example, have not recognized. But Argentina has a right-wing government that the U.S. also helped get to power. Brazil has a fascist government, which the U.S. helped get to power.
Right, Jair Bolsonaro.
These are the governments that have joined this coalition of the willing. The European thing is another story. Obviously, those aren't all right-wing governments, but they also came under pressure. For example, the government of Spain had opposed the sanctions and publicly, and then they pressured them because they had an election on April 28th, so there was a lot of media hype about Venezuela there. And so and Europe kind of follows the U.S. and Spain's also lead on Latin America, but there are divisions in Europe as well. Italy hasn't recognized the Guaido government, for example.
I think, didn't Germany just back away from that recognition?
Oh, I haven't seen it. It might have happened today or something. But
No, I thought if it happened,
but I think they will.
This week.
They will. I think you will see more splits among Europe because Trump himself is right. He said he was upset. He thought this coup was going to happen on January 23rd. That's
Well, I'm thinking that when it didn't happen, that he's directing his energies now. I want to have a war in order to get reelected energies to Iran, which also freaks me out. But we're going to hit a hard break here in a minute and a half, Mark. We're talking with Mark Weisbrot of the Center for Economic and Policy Research, CEPR.net. Mark, the thing that really profoundly confounds me is how we can have so much emphasis on the Mueller report and all this, concern, I think legitimate concern about the possibility that another country, specifically in this case Russia, actually interfered in our election in a way that may well have put Donald Trump in the White House, at the same time that we are openly interfering in the electoral politics of Iran and openly interfering in the electoral politics of Venezuela. And those aren't the only countries that we've been doing this in for some time. Is this just plain old hypocrisy, or is there some law we're breaking? I don't get it.
Oh yes, well, both. I mean, it's extreme. It's it's extreme hypocrisy, obviously, and it is many countries. I mean, I've written about them, but just in the 21st century, the U.S. intervened in Brazil, in Argentina, in Paraguay, in Ecuador, in Bolivia, every place where you had a left government almost. The U.S. did something to try and undermine it or destabilize, or in the extreme cases like Honduras, actually, supported actively a military coup. Hillary Clinton wrote in her memoirs that she worked to prevent the democratically elected president from returning to the country after the coup. So, yeah, this is standard operating procedure in Latin America. And in Venezuela, you can see it does this extra damage because, as you said, look at the U.S. I think whatever the Russians did in that election in 2016 polarized the country. Well, look at what the U.S. is doing in Venezuela and what it does there.